Hi there, beautiful soul. This YouTube movie is about what kind of people develop chronic fatigue syndrome. It's a very controversial topic because many people believe that people with MECFS, how it is also called, are lazy, are having the hippy flu. They just don't want to be productive anymore. And first of all, most things that people say about other people are projections. And in the 9th module of the recovery program, I also talk about projections. The things that you reject from yourself, you can project them on others. And also the things that you would like to be yourself, you can also project them on others. But when people are not meeting your standards anymore, it's easy to project things on them. So those things are, in my opinion, just a reflection of what is going on in their world. Nevertheless, do they have a point? You know, there are these diseases, for example, MRI, this mouse arm, or carpal tunnel syndrome, that only happen to take place on one side of a border, but on the other side there is like virtually none of those cases. And this is what we get in the so-called realm of psychosomatic diseases. And in psychosomatic diseases, it's basically an emotion and a symptom that you believe that is really bad for you is trying to distract yourself from emotions. So is that really the case with chronic fatigue syndrome? People said to me, like, you know, you can only have chronic fatigue syndrome because you live in the Netherlands. It's a rich country. It's a first world disease. Well, first of all, I don't believe the Netherlands to be a first world country. I think it's rather a second world country. But if we look at a map, see, this is the map from my YouTube, from my Google Analytics about my website, and you can see where people live who visit my website. And the first thing that becomes clear is that people from all over the world have chronic fatigue syndrome. And of course, there is a higher amount of visitors in the US and in England, but I think that is more language related than it is related to anything else, because I've had coaching sessions with people all over the world right now, and the only thing that is often in between me helping someone is language. It's obviously not related like psychosomatic diseases to borders. We might see, is there like a personality commonality in between them, or is it genes? With genes, I think it becomes a very this sort of becomes like a victim mentality. It's just my genes, and we see that a lot. My mom had chronic fatigue syndrome, and I spoke recently with Raylan Nagel, and I remember her talking about her mom having chronic fatigue syndrome as well in the past. So is it genes? Could be. But in epigenetics, you learn also that you don't have to be passive about your genes. You can just turn them on and switch them off. And that is more related again to personality. Gabor Mate, he has written a book called When the Body Says No, in which he describes like mostly all the common diseases of our time with the scientifically been proven personality types that will develop over time these diseases. With diseases like breast cancer, he was able to predict them with around a 94% accuracy. And with diseases like ALS, with a 78% accuracy of predicting when someone will get ill, or how they will get ill. So is there a personality type for chronic fatigue syndrome? Yes, there is. And this could also be related to our upbringing, our parents. So maybe the genes is not really the genes, but we inherited their way of acting. They transferred their psyche to us in a way, and it is very common. You've also heard about the theory of third generation war victims, because when one generation get traumatized, they usually pass it over to someone else, and we learn their coping mechanisms, it's in a way, which are all based on stress. But that is another story. I'll come back to that later. So what we see with people in chronic fatigue syndrome is that they're usually very ambitious. They're likely to be entrepreneurs, driven people. They're goodist, they're successful, they're know-alls, they're perfectionists, achievers. This is the so-called type A personality, goal-driven, organized, self-conscious, a very important one, sensitive, because don't underestimate that part. Sensitive is when you pick up on someone else's emotions, and then you can adapt yourself to be more likely of what they want, or you can pick up on someone else's emotions and that, or feelings, and that can stress you out. Anxious, that's a logical consequence of that. Proactive, and they're not really able to deal with their emotions. So sometimes they don't really feel their emotions, and that is a logical consequence of an upbringing in a household where emotions were not really talked about, or they were ignored, or they were ridiculized. So they don't really feel the emotions, for example, sadness and anger. Instead, they feel an urge to do a certain type of behavior, which is all the ambitious, entrepreneurs-driven type A personality things, which on the other hand is the inability to relax, which shows to me that this total personality is based on coping with society. And in society, because I think society is crazy, it's insane. And the more I've healed, the more I've come to see that. But people with chronic fatigue syndrome, they are able to adapt to society's standards where other people had to give up. So they're often good looking. They're often successful. They often manage to have a good study and have a good career. They often manage to adapt to their parents' expectations, and which also shows that they are able to maintain a certain image of who they are supposed to be, which is also a coping mechanism to deal with all the stress that is in society about not really knowing your place. So they often have tried many diets before, probably because diets, because of the stress in the body from all this coping, have already created some symptoms. So, for example, irritable bowel syndrome. It's a stress-related disease. The stress makes us digest our food less, and the intestines can get damaged if we don't have the energy to repair them, because the energy goes to the fight or flight mechanism of the nervous system. And in the fight or flight mechanism, lots of other bodily processes are being put on hold, and all the stress is in our body, which makes us want to escape in all those coping strategies, like achieving or being a certain type of person. But we swallow the stress in our body, and as a result, they've tried all these diets to deal with their probably leaky gut, irritable bowel syndrome. Probably they had already some skin-related symptoms like dandruff or eczema or whatever. And then we come to the point of what chronic fatigue syndrome really is. It's a stress disease. It's a dysregulation of the nervous system between the two sides. On one side, the rest and digest, or the parasympathetic nervous system. And on the other side, the fight, flight, or hide mechanism, or the sympathetic nervous system. And these people, they tend to be addicted to the stress hormones and chemicals that come with this other mode that is actually meant for survival. And when you are in this mode, you can't think straight anymore. And let me hear you out, because I believe you're all very smart people, because most of you are very intelligent. but you're sort of in this survival mode, and you can't really access the frontal clear thinking brain parts anymore, which makes us to achieve all sorts of things to find eventually the safety that we're longing for in the future. And then eventually, because I think the people with MECFS are the strongest people, because they were able to deal with all this pressure, and they were also able to actually meet all these goals that they wanted, that they longed for. These future goals, finally they will be met. And then they realize, wait a minute, I didn't really want this in the first place. So a really vital question in recovery is always, what do I actually want? And maybe that is completely, vague to us, because, in the beginning we got all these blind spots. I had a good life. My parents were good to me. Everything is the way it is supposed to be. I've got a beautiful girlfriend. I've got a house. I've got a great job. I got a good income. Life is good. Because they were adapting to society standards. And the more I healed, the more I realized that those standards are not healthy at all. It's not about achieving those kind of things. It is about achieving connection with who you really are. And if that means you should work in a flower shop because you love flowers, but you hate studying, that means that your income should be lower. And you should work with flowers instead of chemicals and all these kind of things. And I think that it is also clear that most of people with chronic fatigue syndrome have this longing for a simpler life, maybe living in nature, maybe living off the land. And why is that? Because I think that is because at that moment when we truly find connection with the environment, we find out that the stress hormones will lower. So it's actually a very funny paradox then, that the society thinks that we're safe when we have a good income and when we have a good house and good clothes and we're ripped, the six packs and everything. But if it's all from stress, it doesn't make us safe at all. We will get ill eventually. So we are much safer living off the land, making our own food, not having to worry about our image. So maybe that is why most of you have the underlying urge to really connect to nature. Subscribe if you enjoy the content. Visit my website. You can make a donation there. You can also follow a free recovery program that is completely based on donations for me, and where I will give you lots of tools and a step-by-step plan to deal with your fatigue and to improve. It's called the Alignment Recovery Program. Maybe it is something for you. Just check it out. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye.